Somewhere on an icy hillside lane in Iowa, a farmer feels his loaded hay wagon start to push his tractor sideways toward the ditch. The owner's manual says the little latch between his two brake pedals must never be opened on the road. He kicks it loose and uses them anyway, and it saves his rig. Farming is full of moves like that, moves the manual bans outright, and the old hands refuse to give up. Today we are counting down 10 of them, and the one at the top of this list has kept more farmers alive than any warning sticker ever printed. One thing before we start. Every farm runs on 2 sets of instructions. The printed set comes from engineers, lawyers, and insurance adjusters, people who mean well but have never buried a tractor to the axles in spring mud. The other set never got written down at all. It travels by word of mouth, at the sale barn, over the fence line, in the corner of the machine shed, passed along by men who learned it the hard way and lived long enough to teach it. Some of the printed rules deserve every bit of their bold type, and a few tricks on this list should have died with the machines they were invented for. Others, the land figured out first and the engineers caught up later. We will call each one straight. Let's get to work. Number 10. Shifting on the fly. Open the operator's manual for almost any old tractor, a Farmall, a 2-cylinder John Deere, a Ford 8N, and the instruction is the same. Bring the tractor to a complete stop before changing gears. Those old transmissions had no synchronizers at all, just straight-cut gears meshing in an iron case, and the factory position was simple. Stop, shift, go, which meant that every time a farmer pulling a plow hit a tough patch of clay, he was supposed to halt the whole outfit, lose all his momentum, drop a gear, and start again dead in the furrow. Nobody farming for a living had time for that, so the old hands learned to shift on the move. Ease off the load, slip it out of gear, let the engine revs fall or rise to exactly match the ground speed, and slide the lever into the next slot without a sound. Done right, the gears never grind, the plow never stops pulling, and a field that took 2 days takes a day and a half. Done wrong, you shave steel off the gear teeth and eventually pay for a new transmission, which is exactly why the manual said stop first. The printed rule was guarding the greenhorns. The smooth shift was guarding a tractor a man intended to hand down to his son. And the best proof the old-timers had it right came from the factory itself. In 1954, Farmall introduced the torque amplifier, a lever that let you shift on the go without ever touching the clutch. The engineers did not scold the trick. They built it into the tractor. A missed shift cost you gear teeth. The next trick could cost the whole outfit, wagons and all. Number 9. Coasting in neutral. Ask an old farmer who hauled grain to town in the 60s and watch him grin. On the long downhill into the river valley, with 2 loaded wagons swaying behind an old gas tractor, plenty of men would slip the transmission into neutral at the crest and let gravity haul the load for free. Free speed, free fuel, and momentum banked for the climb up the far side. Wagons had no brakes at all in those days, and the tractors barely did, so the whole outfit rolled on nothing but a farmer's memory of that particular hill. It is illegal on public roads. It will fail you on any driving test, and the reason is written in physics. A tractor in neutral has 0 engine braking, and those old transmissions could not always be forced back into gear once the speed built up. If the hill ran longer than you remembered, or a car pulled out of a farm lane, your only tools were 2 small drum brakes fighting 20 tons of grain. More than one county still has a hill the locals call by the name of the man who lost that bet. So why do some old hands defend the trick anyway? Because on the gentle swells of central Illinois or the flats of Kansas, the risk really was small, and the fuel savings were groceries. The law makes perfect sense in the river hills. It makes a lot less sense on the prairie, and the old-timers read that difference in the land itself. Coasting was a gamble a farmer chose to take. The next move is for the moment when the road has already made the choice for him. Number 8. Unlatching the brakes. Every tractor built in the last 80 years has 2 brake pedals, one for each rear wheel, so you can drag a wheel and pivot tight at the end of a field. And every operator's manual carries the same warning in bold print. Lock the pedals together before any road travel, every single time. Safety courses repeated, because stabbing one brake at road speed can spin a tractor like a coin. The old-timers listened to every word of it and left the latch loose all winter anyway. Because on ice, when a loaded hay wagon starts to push and the back of the tractor begins to walk sideways toward the ditch, a skilled farmer can flick that latch open and feather one brake, just the downhill side, just enough drag to pull the nose straight. It works like a rudder. The farmer on that icy Iowa lane at the start of this video was doing exactly that, reaching for a forbidden control in the only half second that mattered. None of the printed warnings are wrong. In clumsy hands, a split brake at speed causes the exact crash it could have prevented, and modern tractors with four-wheel braking have mostly retired the trick. But talk to a gray-haired man who hauled silage down frozen township roads for 40 winters, and he will tell you about the nights that latch earned its keep. And winter is where the forbidden toolbox really opens up, because the next 2 tricks were born on mornings cold enough to stop a thermometer, and both of them will wreck a modern engine. Number 7. Gasoline in the diesel tank. Picture a dairy barn in Minnesota, 5:30 in the morning, 28 below zero. 60 cows are waiting on feed, and the loader tractor will not draw fuel, because overnight the diesel in its tank turned to wax. Deep cold does that to diesel. The paraffin in the fuel crystallizes into a cloudy slush, plugs the filter, and starves the engine, and no amount of cranking will cure it. A farmer standing in that barnyard could not wait until noon for a fuel truck, so he reached for the red can. A couple gallons of gasoline, or kerosene when he had it, poured straight into the tank, thinned the wax and got fuel flowing again, at temperatures that froze everything else on the place. The strange part is that the oldest tractors were built to drink more than one fuel on purpose. That generation of farmers grew up on all-fuel machines, tractors designed to start on gasoline and switch to cheap distillate once the block warmed up. To them, blending fuels was simply how a tractor worked, and the habit rode straight into the diesel era, where the crude mechanical injection pumps of the 50s and 60s shrugged the mixture off. Modern iron is a different animal entirely. A new common rail diesel meters fuel through injectors machined so fine that the diesel itself is the only lubricant keeping them alive, and gasoline washes that protection away. Try the old trick on a tractor built this century and you are wagering a 5-figure fuel system against a $20 problem, because that same $20 now buys a jug of anti-gel at the co-op, which is the old kerosene fix with a label, a dosage chart, and none of the gamble. Number 6. The ether habit. Same brutal morning, different dead engine. A cold-soaked diesel will crank all day without firing, because cylinders that cold cannot squeeze enough heat out of the air to light the fuel. The old cure sat on a shelf in every machine shed north of Interstate 80. A can of ether starting fluid. One quick shot into the air cleaner, turn the key, and a tractor that was dead iron a minute earlier coughs, rattles, and roars to life, while the cattle bawl at the gate for their breakfast. The engine makers despise the stuff, and their reasons are not imaginary. Ether lights off far more violently than diesel, and a heavy hand on that spray button sets the charge off while the piston is still on its way up. That is how a man cracks a piston or bends a rod before the sun even clears the grain bins. On newer engines, the danger multiplies, because most of them preheat their intake air with glow plugs or an electric grid heater, and ether meeting a glowing element can detonate inside the intake itself. That is not the lawyers talking. That is chemistry, and it has scattered more than one air cleaner across a shop floor. So why did every old farmer keep a can within reach? Because on the plain mechanical engines with no heaters and no electronics, One disciplined half-second puff was nearly harmless, and it stood between a man and a full day of frozen chores. The old dairyman had a rule about that can, and it fit on a bumper sticker. 1 shot wakes the engine. 2 shots wake the mechanic. Number 5. Turning up the pump. On every old mechanical diesel, buried on the side of the injection pump, there is an adjustment the factory sealed, and the dealer was never supposed to touch. Farmers call it turning up the pump. A quarter turn of that screw feeds the engine more fuel, and more fuel means more horsepower. 10, 15, sometimes 20 extra horses hiding inside iron you already paid for. Manufacturers banned it for a stack of reasons. It voids the warranty, it can push exhaust temperatures high enough to melt pistons, and it turns the smoke black as a coal train under load. Dealers were told to check the seals, and plenty of warranty claims died the moment a mechanic saw one broken. The farmers heard all of that and reached for the wrench anyway because the ban never quite added up to them. The same engine block, with the pump set richer at the factory, was sold as the bigger model for thousands of dollars more. The horsepower was in there. The company was just charging for the screw. So on farms across the Midwest, tractors quietly made more power than their serial numbers admitted, and the county tractor pools turned the forbidden screw into a folk sport. The veterans' rule was moderation. A quarter turn for the hills, watch the smoke, and never lug it hot. Today the game has moved into software, and the modern version, tampering with emission systems, is a federal offense with real fines attached. So the era of the honest quarter turn is closing. If this list is bringing back memories, or teaching you things Grandpa never got around to explaining, hit subscribe. This channel digs into farming, machinery, and rural life every single week. Now back to the countdown, because turning up the pump got you up the hill. Number 4 gets you out of the hole. Number 4, rocking it out. Every farmer, no exceptions, eventually puts a tractor somewhere it cannot get itself back out of. A field that looked dry from the road, a feedlot after 3 days of rain, a snowed-in yard in February. The tires spin once, the machine settles, and suddenly 10 tons of iron is sitting on its belly in the mud. The manual and every fleet safety policy agree on what happens next. Shut it down and call for help. Out here, that advice collides with geography. The nearest heavy wrecker might be 40 miles of gravel away. The neighbor with the big 4-wheel drive is in the middle of his own harvest, and a planter parked in the mud is burning through the best planting weather of the year. So the old hands taught themselves to walk a tractor out. Ease forward just until the tires begin to slip, then off the throttle, roll back into the ruts, forward again a little farther each time, packing the ground firmer and stretching the ruts longer with every pass until the tractor finally climbs its own ramp out of the hole. The companies banned it because the clumsy version of that move slips the clutch until it smokes, and splitting a tractor in half for a clutch job during planting season is a disaster measured in weeks, not dollars. But watch a veteran do it. Differential lock engaged so both wheels pull together. Front tires dead straight, never a wild spin, never a smoking hub, out in 5 minutes and back to work. The difference between the man who ruins a clutch and the man who saves an afternoon has never appeared in any manual, because it cannot be printed. It can only be earned. Rocking gets a tractor out of the mud. Number 3 is the one hack on this list where we have to be honest that the manual is mostly winning the argument. Number 3, bypassing the seat switch. Every modern tractor has an operator presence switch under the seat. Stand up, and it kills the power takeoff, or the whole engine. The idea is simple and written in blood. The power takeoff shaft, that spinning steel shaft driving the baler behind you, has killed and maimed more farmers than nearly anything else on the farm, usually when someone stepped off to clear a plug with everything still turning. The switch exists so the machine dies the moment you leave the seat, and farmers hate it. On rough ground, the switch triggers when you bounce, shutting down the baler mid-windrow 10 times a morning. So across the country, seat switches get wired shut, zip-tied, or fooled with a chunk of firewood, and the work goes on uninterrupted. The old hands defend it the way they defend everything on this list. The interruptions are real, the lost time is real, and a careful man knows where his boots are. But this is the one where the fence line wisdom runs thinnest, because the ban is not protecting the tractor. It is protecting the 2 seconds of bad judgment that even a careful man has once in 40 years, stepping off toward a plugged baler with the shaft still spinning. Every rural community has a name and a funeral attached to that mistake. The honest verdict from this channel is that some banned hacks belong in the toolbox, and this one mostly belongs in the past, which makes the next one remarkable, because number 2 is the only hack on this list that used to be condemned and is now official government policy. Number 2, trash farming. For most of the 20th century, there was one commandment in American agriculture: thou shalt plow. Every fall or spring, you turned the soil black from fence to fence, buried the stubble, and left a field so clean you could eat off it. A plowed field was a moral statement, proof its owner was a real farmer. Then a handful of stubborn men started planting corn straight into last year's residue. No plow, no disc. Seed slotted right through the trash. The neighbors laughed at them from the coffee shop window. Extension agents shook their heads. They were called trash farmers, and their weedy-looking fields were treated as an embarrassment to the county. But those farmers had watched their topsoil roll away in muddy creeks and dust clouds for decades, and they noticed something. The untilled fields held their soil, held their moisture, and after a few years yielded just fine, while burning half the fuel. The dirt was telling them the plow was the problem. Then something rare happened. The erosion studies piled up. The researchers came around, and the government chose not to punish the heretics. It hired their idea. Today, no-till farming is an official conservation practice promoted by the Department of Agriculture, and in plenty of counties, the government will pay a farmer cost-share money to do the exact thing his father was laughed at for doing. Ask one of the original trash farmers how vindication feels, and you will not get a speech. You will get a shrug, and maybe 4 words. Took them long enough. And that brings us to number 1, the wide stance. Number 1, setting the wheels out. Walk around any hill country farm and look at the rear wheels on the old tractors. They are pushed out to the very last notch, dished wide, sometimes wearing an extra set of duals, a stance far wider than the settings printed in the book. Manufacturers publish approved tread widths and warn about axle stress beyond them. Road rules in plenty of states say that past a certain width you need flags, escorts, permits, or daylight-only travel, and more than one farmer has taken a ticket, or a broken mailbox and an angry neighbor, moving a wide tractor down a township road. The hill farmers pay the fines and keep the wheels out, because the physics do not negotiate. A tractor tips over sideways when its center of gravity passes outside its wheels, and every inch of extra track moves that line further away. Rollovers are the number 1 killer on American farms. Year after year, decade after decade, most of them sideways, on slopes, in an event that takes about a second and gives no warning. A wide tractor on a hillside simply refuses to do what a narrow one does. So when the mowing runs along a steep creek bank, veteran farmers crank the wheels out past the book, past the road limit, past the neighbor's patience. Ask one of them why he risks the ticket, and the answer never varies. A fine is an argument with the county. A rollover is a conversation nobody gets to finish. And in 50 years of hillsides, nobody ever stood at a funeral wishing the wheels had been set narrower. Step back and look at the whole list, and a pattern is hard to miss. Nearly all of these rules were written with one person in mind, the least experienced operator who will ever climb into the seat. That is who warning labels are for, and honestly, that is who they should be for. But rules built for the first-year man land differently on the farmer in his 50th season, the one who has read this exact hillside, this exact mud hole, this exact frozen morning 1,000 times before. What he brings to that hillside took half a century to build, a kind of pattern recognition no committee can put on a sticker. And every so often, the committee admits it. The trash farmers were mocked for 30 years, then handed cost-share checks for the very practice they were mocked for. The dirt knew. The old hands listened to the dirt. The paperwork just showed up last. If you enjoyed riding along, subscribe for more stories from farming, machinery, and rural America. And if you want to see the machines the rule book banished for good, watch our video on the forbidden farm machines regulators killed off next. Keep the rubber side down, and we will see you in the field.